So one of my favorite things about how we approach it at Sensei is, so we have these 3 pillars. We focus on move, nourish, and rest. And nothing happens in a vacuum, right? It is so connected. So how movement shows up, right? How we move in our environment, right? What moves us, right? The things that are nourishing, right? The breath is nourishing, right? Time in nature, community. Rest could look like sleep. It could look like active rest. It could look like resting in the present moment. So the way that we explore and experiment with how these things come together is so empowering, because then if we know, okay, this is what taps into that for me, this is what fills that need for me, then I know, okay, I can reset myself when I feel off, right? And so the interconnectivity of those areas is what's most interesting to me. So from a nutrition perspective, right, we have people come in with nutrition goals, but if sleep or stress management foundationally is out of alignment, then sometimes it feels like we're shoveling, right? And shoveling in the sand keeps falling in the back because we don't have that foundation built. So how we can help the body, address a goal in one area is going to look like maybe adjusting the dials in a whole bunch of different areas in a small way. So that's what I tend to find with helping things work together.
So this week we're very excited to have Brooke Damerel talking to us. And Brooke, we met you last year in December at a wellness retreat in Mexico, which was a really exciting experience. And we got to chat to you, and we were really kind of interested in your background, and we kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit and see how you can maybe share some light on some of the nutritional side of wellness things for us and our listeners. You have a master degree in public health, you're a registered dietitian, but you're also an overall health and wellness lifestyle coach, and you're also a nutritional guide at Sensei Porcupine, which is this amazing wellness retreat near Palm Springs. And that's a really interesting thing. We want to dive a little bit into more your work there and what that really means. So welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. And yes, it was such a fantastic experience to be at Wanderlust and get to connect with you and meet other like-minded people in the industry and that are promoting this idea of well-being and how we can help people get in touch with what really matters to them and what that next step might be for wellness. So it's a lot of where my interest is as well. And one of the things I love being about Sensei, right, is that's our main focus as well there.
Yeah, so going back to your background, where has this journey all started for you? What's your background experience and personal interest within that as well, as you mentioned?
Yes, so I master's in public health. I'm a registered dietitian, and I got started down that path. I was living in Portland, Oregon for a little while and working at a small boutique firm that had an open concept office. And I noticed that when I was making lifestyle changes, I started exercising, eating better, and I stopped catching everything that was going around the office. Everybody was getting taken down during flu season, and I wouldn't catch it, even though we were all in the same space. So this was right out of undergrad. I started looking closer at that and saying, okay, there's something to this. So I went back to school at night, started doing my master's, and just fell down the rabbit hole, basically, of preventive health and how, basically, my favorite expression is, how can we help the body do its job? Right? We have so many mechanisms and things in place that are meant to heal, are meant to create balance, homeostasis, right? And when we intentionally do things that help the body with those mechanisms, right, it has such an easier time, right? So the body does so much for me. I'm so grateful. And how can I help it, basically? So.
Does that mean you started to put sort of body first as your first sort of modality to help sort of fix yourself and your positive outlook in the future?
I just started looking for patterns and making comparisons and saying, okay, if I'm choosing these things, this is the outcome I'm getting, right? So it became sort of a experimentation on myself. And over the last, 20 some odd years, I've been doing different nutritional experiments, lifestyle experiments, just kind of seeing what works and what doesn't. And I like to generally help people become the expert in themselves, right? Because it's not one size fits all. It's not what works for me is necessarily going to work for you. So the helping people kind of put that lens on and be a detective and say, okay, if I do these things, how does that affect me? What do I notice? Because then they become more and more the expert.
Yeah, I mean, we're really strong believers that everything we really need is within us, and we keep trying to like find ways of, okay, what is it mentally, spiritually that we can do to kind of still the mind and tap into that kind of inner knowledge. That's kind of how I always kind of explain it.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting with nutrition as well, because nutrition, and we talked about like the dimensions of wellness, and nutrition falls under kind of that first wellness pillar of physical wellness. But there's obviously more components to it, and especially nutrition, like the mind, like mind-body connection plays such a big role. Mm-hmm. What have you found on that aspect? What influences us? Because I think you were talking about positive psychology. What else have you found is something that's really important to get to the nutrition side of things?
Oh, you're so right. It is so interconnected. And that's actually, so one of my favorite things about how we approach it at Sensei is, so we have these 3 pillars. We focus on move, nourish, and rest. And nothing happens in a vacuum, right? It is so connected. So how movement shows up, right? How we move in our environment, right? What moves us, right? The things that are nourishing, right? The breath is nourishing, right? Time in nature, community. Rest could look like sleep. It could look like active rest. It could look like resting in the present moment. So the way that we explore and experiment with how these things come together is so empowering, because then if we know, okay, this is what taps into that for me, this is what fills that need for me, then I know, okay, I can reset myself when I feel off, right? And so the interconnectivity of those areas is what's most interesting to me. So from a nutrition perspective, right, we have people come in with nutrition goals, but if sleep or stress management foundationally is out of alignment, then sometimes it feels like we're shoveling, right? And shoveling in the sand keeps falling in the back because we don't have that foundation built. So how we can help the body, address a goal in one area is going to look like maybe adjusting the dials in a whole bunch of different areas in a small way. So that's what I tend to find with helping things work together.
When we met you in Mexico, we had just recorded our first few episodes of this podcast, and we'd gone through the 6 pillars of wellness, which were laid out by the Global Wellness Institute. And the number 1 for them is physical, which covers sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And we're now firm believers that sleep is the number 1 pillar, because a poor night's sleep leads to so many other knock-on effects, where you can have one bad meal here and there, or you can miss a gym session. But if you have a really terrible night's sleep, it's an instant impact on the choices you make the next day. So we can touch on, I'd like you to give a little summary of Sensei at the moment, but while we're on this subject, how do you guys make sure you're sort of coordinating? Because like you said, you can't just be, you're a nutritionist, but you've got to understand the other pillars that people come to you with.
100%. So I guess I'll give like a little overview of how guests would come and experience Sensei, and then we can see how it sort of works together. But I love how it's laid out. The word I keep coming back to is intentional, right? Mm-hmm. We start with intentions. So a guest will choose a wellness package. So we have a couple different options. The optimal wellbeing program is our kind of flagship 5-night stay. We have different versions for rest and recovery, or for shorter stays, or even a longer sabbatical stay if someone wants to come for a month, full immersion, or a big goal to tackle. But the Optimum Wellbeing Program is designed with this kind of arc in mind of, you start with your intention setting, you make sure we're all dialed in with what we want to accomplish, right? We do one-on-ones, we do classes, group sessions, and then we wrap it up at the end with a My Plan. So they're ready to take all those pieces home. So that initial goal setting, intention setting, what do I want to feel, where am I at, what's working, what's not, is a huge piece of it. And then those in the middle one-on-one sessions, we have a whole team of guides and practitioners in different specialties. So the guides are basically behavior change scientists, and then we geek out about our own individual field, right? So I love nutrition. My counterparts are exercise physiologists and mindset specialists, mindfulness, yoga. So each of us is, so excited about our particular area and also how they connect. So a guest coming in is going to get a chance to go deep into each of these areas, right? They can do a one-on-one focused on sleep. They can do VO2 max sessions to get a sense of their heart rate zones. And so getting all these pieces together, body composition, we do a finger-pick blood analysis, just a simple way to get a picture of what's going on inside and how what they've been doing is showing up in their body. And so as we kind of add each of these layers and pieces, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about nutrition. We're going to talk about your mindset. We're going to talk about how your sleep plays into that. So each session becomes a deeper and deeper look at, okay, that's why this is happening. That's how this connects. The breath is part of everything we do in all of our classes, even our bodywork and esthetician treatments. So there's really a lot of interwoven themes of the breath, the nervous system balance. And so that's basically the arc of how they would get to work with all of us.
And before the guests are coming, excuse me, is there any prep work beforehand where you fill out a form or you give any sort of goals? Or is it, how does that work?
Yeah. So I would meet with the Optimum Wellbeing Program guests on the phone before they arrive. We also send them a Whoop digital tracker. So it gives a little, no screens, very simple interface, but it has a great sense of that activity and sleep and heart rate variability data. So we have a little bit starting out just to get a sense of making the invisible more visible to them. And we're adding data to the storytelling, right? Some people resonate with data, some people don't. So we have these different ways to meet people where they are. So we also have a pre-arrival questionnaire, which has a little bit of a sense of where to start so that when my team gets to meet with them, we know to hit the ground running. Or walking mindfully, if that's what is called for.
And what's the, for those who don't know, Sensei, this is the second Sensei. It's in Porcupine Creek in Palm Springs. It looks like looks like an incredible property. And it's kind of high-end luxury wellness to be true, but irrelevant of the price point, what kind of guests are coming? Are these people that are already on a wellness journey, or are these complete novices, or is it a complete mix?
We have gotten a variety. So this Sensei was originally a passion project. So Mr. Larry Ellison and Dr. David Agus are our two co-founders, and they met through the loss of a mutual friend, actually, unfortunately, and they got together and thought, how can we prevent it from getting to such a clinical place where it's too late to intervene, right? And that's a lot of the conversation around prevention. So the idea was, can we create this space, bring in all these experts, create this luxurious environment where everything else gets to just fade away and we can focus on what matters. And so that's what they set out to do, to guide the world to greater well-being. And so we started in Lanai in 2019. And then Sensei Porcupine Creek opened in 2022. So this is our second season here in Greater Palm Springs. And it really has been that. So in terms of the type of guests we see, there are individuals that are on a wellness journey already, and it's kind of, what is that next layer? There's a lot of couples looking to reset or major milestone life changes. I've gotten to sit with people on big milestone birthdays and events and anniversaries, and some commemorative trips where there's grief, looking to plan a next chapter ahead and say, okay, here's what's worked and what hasn't, and what do I want this to look like in the future? So it is a little bit of a mix. There are some people who are like, I'm totally new to wellness, where do I start? And there's some people that are like, okay, I'm so in it that I'm driving myself crazy. How do I, make this more livable, right? So it really is a spectrum, and it is such a fun thing to be able to meet people where they are and say, okay, here's what's working, what's the next step?
You mentioned the first Sensei having opened in 2019, which we kind of date now pre-pandemic. Is there any difference between, and I don't know if you can answer that, but guests coming before the pandemic and then guests coming now, is there any change in either behavior, routines, like thought processes to health and wellness? Is there anything that you think has changed since it first opened?
Well, I know Dr. David Agus will say that one of the benefits, silver linings, I suppose, of the whole pandemic situation is more people are focusing on preventive health and wellness, right? And that idea, like I was talking about at the beginning, of how can we help our body do its job so that it can have stronger immune function and, be able to stay well. So looking at, right, there's always things we can control and things we can't control, but of the things we can, right, what are the things we have access to and control over to adjust? So I would say there just generally in the industry is more interest in wellness, prevention, looking into what we can and can't control with that. That's what I tend to see. And more people are hearing about us now, so I think that it's moving in that direction.
I know Warren Buffett had a famous quote where he talked about if you were just given one car at the start of your life and you had to maintain that for its whole, throughout your life, you would fuel it properly, you would tinker with it, you'd put it in the garage, you'd keep it in immaculate condition. Yet we somehow don't seem to do that. We know that deep down, but we don't give that same care and attention to our minds and body. Why do you think that is?
A sense of perceived invincibility or that maybe denial. But I think that, one of the things that we do see a lot is people coming post a recent diagnosis, right? Or something that caused the light bulb to go on, right? That the dashboard light is now blinking. Now we need to do something with that. So ideally, right, if we're looking at what is the trickle-down effect, how can we start earlier before it gets to that point? But, there's primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention. So there's all sorts of layers that we can work on no matter at what point it is in the journey.
Yeah, I think like you were saying as well, people being aware of it, like awareness of what Sensei offers, and partially that's why we're doing what we're doing as well, is to make wellness more of a day-to-day topic and being part of more of our lifestyle than something that you're doing because there's a scarcity in your, something that scares you because of your health implication. So I think the more we can talk about it and spread it, and not it being something that feels like, it's something that either always has to cost a lot of money, or it's something that's going to be really difficult, or I have to change my identity because I have to stop doing all those things that I think are seen as fun. I think that's a big part too, to just have that, adopt a new lifestyle and just knowing, okay, if I want longevity, that's something I got to work on day to day, but making it fun as well. And I think that's something that's really important.
Well, and I love what you said about identity, right? Because that is one of such an important driver of behavior change, is that sense of identity, right? I am someone who is such a powerful statement, right? Because then whatever comes after that, it just becomes that natural extension, right? I am someone who knows I feel better when I move in the morning, right? I am someone who knows that I need X hours of sleep every night. Then it's not something where I'm white knuckling as I should move more and I really ought to not eat that. It's just, this is who I am. And of course that's a natural extension, right, of me knowing who I am and what I value.
Yeah, the should word. It's always the
should versus must.
Right, then it's not just a thing about gratitude of I get to, right? What a privilege to be able to, but it's also just that this is fundamentally who I am and what is important to me, and how I know I make my own life easier by doing these things, right? I'm not shooting myself in the foot by getting up and crashing my blood sugar right away,
What are some, would you say, daily practices that work for you, that you say, okay, these are my rituals, my non-negotiable rituals each day to keep me on track and make me stay in that identity, and not it being I should do that, but just you want to do it?
It's a good question. I have experimented with so many things over the years, and I find different pieces work at different times in life. So I have a young daughter right now, so I'm in a sort of intense chapter of life. But I think that one of the things that helps me, children and animals are so amazing for helping stay in the present moment. And so a lot of my practice around breathing, around being present, I use her kind of as part of that, right? When we're playing together, when we have a rebounder, so we jump on the trampoline together. What else do? We set out yoga mats together. So I try to incorporate her in a lot of my practices. And I think that feels bigger than just myself in a way, so that makes it easier to prioritize time for those things. Sleep is pretty foundational, so I do prioritize that. And I have a lot of, I know we'll talk about the built environment, right? But I have a lot of practices that are habit stacked or linked to as I'm going through my day. So one of those being at Sensei, there are it's absolutely gorgeous, but when you walk out the door, you see mountains most of the time. We're surrounded by the Santa Rosa Mountains. So when I open a door and I walk out and I see the mountains, that's a cue to take a deep breath. So I have a lot of practices that I've built into the day.
Yeah, and that's like you were saying, these cues in the built environment, that's what we're really interested in. And this is partially why we want to talk to experts like you as well, to get out of our own just sort of design eye and just really see, okay, what are the cues that make our minds open for positive change? And what is it that our built environment, apart from the regulars that we know, air quality, light, healthy materials, but what are the other visual things that our senses stimulate or not stimulate in that case, really, that helps us with making better choices? So that's always really, really interesting for us to find out and focus on.
And one of the things that I've really loved people seeing and experiencing at Sensei is that sense of visual calm, right? It's not noisy. It's very intentionally that way. And actually, so this is our logo, our little torii gate. So it's a minimalist take on a Japanese Shinto shrine gates. They're usually red. And they're indicative of coming from the everyday into a sacred space. And we really have tried to set it up that way. So you come through these big wooden gates when you drive onto property, and everything is intentionally set up so that the visual noise is low. It's all natural colors and environment, textures, and it really gives this 360 feeling of nervous system reset. And so many times we have, whether it's, totally burnt out CEOs or, parents that are at their wits' end and they're coming for just a reset, a breath of fresh air and getting away. And whether they come in with a goal around weight loss or moving more or whatever it is, so many times they leave and they tell me, oh my gosh, Brooke, I undervalued rest. And something about being here just feels different. And so that visual lack of clutter, that intentional, we're not triggering that invisible to-do list, right, with the stack of mail and the laundry or the things going on, right? So these intentional environments where the mind doesn't have to keep reloading that to-do list tab makes such a difference. So I love those elements. We can talk about the nutrition built environment, but in terms of the general space, it definitely changes how people feel, how their nervous system responds.
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing that's always been a challenge to me, even when we've designed a property not dissimilar to this, is how do people succeed when they leave? Because I can imagine it's easy. You take that switch off, you're now being pampered and coached, and everything is there for you to succeed. How do we, when we leave somewhere like that, or just in our daily lives, because motivation wanes too, that's something that doesn't last forever. So what are the success stories that your guests have once they leave?
Well, I love that. Motivation is like bathing, it doesn't last, so we recommend it daily.
Right.
So we do have a couple elements built in for that, because when I think, yes, we want to look at what's your intention for while you're here on property, but what also are you looking, with an eye to when you go home? What do you want to see change or see adjust? I call them experiments. So we wrap up at the end of the stay with the My Plan session, and that is going to lay out, okay, what are the top things that really resonated, that you experienced here, that you want to learn more about, dig into? And then we have a full guide to growth document that we send with them. So it has their takeaways, all of their notes from all their sessions, and their top maybe 3 intentions that they want to experiment with. So we go through that final session and what does this look like? What do you want? What would get in the way? How do we work around that? So they take that home, they play with it for a while. We also have a fantastic team that works virtually as well. And so there's follow-up sessions that are included with this program. So we get a chance to see, okay, how did that show up? What got in the way? What needs adjusting? So we want to make it so that it's sustainable. So in terms of what we've seen with success stories, it's been so fun. I had a sabbatical guest recently who was here with us for a month and had a major big goal. So getting to talk with her on the phone later and see how that was working, the things that had been challenges. So we got to troubleshoot a little more. And the idea is, right, we do have remote sessions now with the guides, which is a huge win in terms of expanding access. So currently just for guests that have stayed with us, they can follow up between stays. And then they come back. We have people that have come back every few months to now annually that we've been open a couple years, or they go back and forth with Lanai and PC, Porcupine Creek. I had one guest that came last year. He came back this year having lost 40 pounds. And his main takeaway was putting his phone away before bed. It's the little things sometimes just create that shift.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Like you're saying, the little things, but often it's the bringing the mind to a calm point that you actually can see those little things and that they stick with you. I think that's important. Yeah.
I often think a lot of these. When I break it all down, I think it's all pretty simple. Like sleep, get good night's sleep, get up, exercise, lift weights, whatever it is, and then just watch what you put in your mouth. But we find it so difficult, and I can't understand why. And I don't. It's obviously psychology, but are there any patterns that you see why we just as a species just find it so, we're obsessed with it and we find it so difficult when I think it's actually quite easy?
It's not rocket science.
Right.
I appreciate that. And there are some things that I think that make it so challenging. There's a couple authors I really like that look at this. Cal Newport is one of them, and he wrote Deep Work and Digital Minimalism. And so looking at that dopamine response to the reach for the technology, like when you realize I'm reaching for my phone, I'm reaching for the fridge, the brain is smart, right? It knows that's the quickest way to get to that. And it's like, okay, thank you brain for trying to help me. Prefrontal cortex back online. How can I make a more informed decision, right? Instead of just knee-jerk reaction for the easiest hit. So that's part of it, right? Is understanding the psychology and the mechanisms that are taking place that drive those decisions. I also like Dr. Casey Means' work that I know is at Wanderlust as well. Her book, Good Energy, just came out. And so I love all of her thinking and work around the food environment, right? And our culture and the types of foods that people tend to consume that are very reinforcing, that override a lot of the body's hunger and satiety signaling. So there's layers to it, right? In terms of why that becomes more challenging, depending on the choices we make.
It's essentially a game against yourself, isn't it? And who's going to win? Is it the subconscious brain trying to get to, the quickest way to get calories into the system and protect yourself sitting on the sofa, not exerting yourself, versus, the conscious mind going, no, I need to do the opposite of both of those things. Right. And it's such a fascinating conflict that I think we all have to deal with.
And our spaces make such a difference in that, right? How we've created so much comfort and convenience, and our bodies aren't moving and interacting with environments the way that they were sort of designed to. And so the more that we can create that opportunity in daily life, right? How we're moving, how we're interacting with spaces, what opportunities there are, even just the silly things like sitting on a exercise ball as your chair, right? Forces a different engagement of muscles, right? A lot of our corporate team at Sensei is on the treadmills under the desks just to get some more steps in. We would do walking challenges and fun things like that just to kind of promote this different use of our bodies.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned earlier when you were saying you have a young daughter and you were saying you're incorporating her into the healthy lifestyle. I think that's a really good thing to point that out, because it's really hard often when we come from a let's say, a perfect routine, perfect environment, like Ben was saying as well, and then you come to like your daily life and you don't want to isolate yourself when you're doing something and not see family because you're just taking care of yourself. So being kids, especially being part of the lifestyle and the routine, and also making them exposed to that early on, of like, oh, look what mom's doing, like that becomes a natural thing, like she's moving, she's resting, and seeing that as an example. So I think that's a really important thing, because for me it's always like you can have this perfect and I think there was actually something where you were giving a quote of this golden routine, but then life gets in the way, or what's the reality, what actually works. So I think that integration is really important, like you were describing, to make sure that it works with our day-to-day.
Right. We had a wonderful editor from Vogue visit, and so I got to connect with her about this idea of like Ben was saying, there could be just, this is perfect gold standard, right? And then this is what we do. Why wouldn't we do it? Why is this hard? But then when life happens, right, where does that become livable? And a lot of people have this, an all or nothing mentality where if it's not perfect, then I'm not doing anything, right? So where I think it's helpful is, okay, if it's a spectrum, where can we make it livable? And so a step closer is going to be more beneficial than aiming for perfection and having it just, then nothing happens. Yeah. So the pieces that we can bring in through the daily life, and not just for kids or children looking up to us, we reflect on each other, right? There's social contagion with the people we spend the most time around, and social support and accountability, but also co-regulation, right, of our nervous systems. How we're breathing, how we're showing up affects the people around us. So all of our habits are not only helping ourselves, but also our community.
It's so true. And with you being nutrition focused, we read and we watch a lot of stuff, and there seems to be so many different people giving so many different pieces of advice that are all supposedly the gospel truth, that this is what you should do. And I know recently there was a huge trend for intermittent fasting. Now a lot of those people that I'm watching are now sort of backtracking on that, saying, actually, I'm not sure if this is the right way to go. It's partly because, from what I understand, it's because they feel like people may be sort of not getting as much of the nutrients in because they're eating less, so therefore it's less protein or whatever it may be. Do you have any areas where you think, no, these really are good takeaways, whether it's priorities in protein, intermittent fasting, and I appreciate everybody's different.
Yes, if it were one size fits all, it would be maybe very boring. But I think personally, when I look at a label, I'm looking for protein and fiber. Fiber is so underconsumed in America, and the benefits are just very extensive in terms of microbiome health and lowering cholesterol and satiety and all the things. But in terms of when we look at the literature, right, Sensei, we're very evidence-based. There are some things that we know are, demonstrated to promote longevity. Obviously, the Mediterranean diet is very well studied in terms of chrononutrition and the kind of science of timing food. Consistency is what we tend to see as being foundationally helpful. Again, it's an input like light, where we're helping our body do its job by supporting that circadian rhythm, by helping the cells understand what it's time for, what it's not time for. So those kind of foundationally are things we can look at. And I love just having people, like I said, be the experts in them. And Dr. Casey Means has a great perspective of, okay, there's different ways to get to metabolic health. It could look different depending on your dietary preferences. And if we're looking at energy level and lab work, and those are looking okay, then cool, what you're doing is probably working. So I love that there's room to listen to what works best for your body, and to kind of make it your own. I would say, generally speaking, watching blood sugar is going to be a benefit. So not creating those massive spikes, trying to keep things even as possible. Generally speaking, is going to help with a lot of things.
I mean, I think the kind of blood sugar spikes is definitely something I see within myself as well, is that keeping pauses between me. I'm like a 3 meal a day. I'm like, I need like 3 meals. I don't need a lot of snacks. I don't do the grazing in between. I know that doesn't work for me if I eat small portions. I just need my good 3 meals. And that's just a mental thing for me as well. It's like I can't trick my body. If I have a snack, it feels like I didn't eat. So it's like, but I think that's more coming down really to understanding yourself, and like you're saying as well, resetting that intention and just knowing. Because I think when we have that pause, we kind of ultimately know what works for us and what doesn't. And having, like you're saying, the expert guiding you, okay, this is what I'm seeing on the outside, this is what could be right for you. And then when you have the pause, you kind of understand. And the fine tuning, I think that's important too, just to give it some time and see when something works, and not expecting this is definitely going to work. It's a flow, and it's like a trying it out. And I think that sometimes makes it so hard too, because you can't have that solution within a week, a month. Sometimes it takes, in my opinion or my experience, it takes a year sometimes to adjust to something and have a new rhythm, and that's unfortunately nowadays too long to see a result or a change. It's another tricky part of that.
Yes, we are, that again with the reinforced mechanisms from our screens, we're used to instant gratification, and the body does have a little bit of a lag time in terms of resetting its enzyme levels and receptors and things like that. But I think fundamentally giving it, even if I think about nutrition, right, as a field, there's not just what we eat, there's also how we eat, there's when we eat, with whom, everything else going on, sleep, stress management, right? So there's so many layers to it, even just within this one area that we can play with. So it might be that the actual what needs to be adjusted, right? It might be that how we're eating, are we scarfing something at our desk or grabbing something in the car, or just standing in the kitchen or picking off a kid's plate or something like that, right? Maybe how can we tell our nervous system we're safe, right? Using the breath, using our senses to engage with food, to connect with how it's plated, to the moment we're in, and all those things start that digestive cascade, tell the body that we're in a safe place. We're not being chased by a tiger or an email or whatever it is, right? We can be calm. We can invest in those long-term processes like digestion, assimilation of nutrition, reproductive and hormone health, immune function, right? All those long-term things that we want the body to do. And starting with how we're sitting, how we're breathing, how we're eating, that's a huge piece of it too, besides the what.
Yeah.
What I like now is that a lot of what you just said, I think pre-pandemic, a lot of people wouldn't really paid attention to or just heard it as sort of woo-woo noise. But I think so many more people now are very much in tune with their own health and well-being that it starts to resonate, and it starts to, even friends of ours that I now see adopting a much more mindful approach to all aspects of their life where they wouldn't have done previously. So it's a fascinating time. One thing that we sort of touched on, we talked about instant gratification, and not the one thing that's very new in the industry is the weight loss drugs. And not that I'm certainly not an expert, and I know it's not something you're sort of heavily into, but I wonder if it's something that any of your guests are experiencing, and how you're helping them navigate nutritionally when they're taking that as an option.
Definitely. So we do have, obviously it's definitely out there. I think with any intervention, any change medically, pharmautically, anything like that, I would say fundamentally, can we approach it with a lifestyle change first, right? With any sort of, whether it's blood pressure or, overweight or something. Okay, so if we've exhausted those things, I'm grateful that there are, pharmacological interventions if needed. Can we see that as sort of scaffolding to create lifestyle change? So with some of these type of medications, there's some element of disconnection with the natural signaling pathways, right? So I think just bringing that awareness to, okay, while we're experiencing this, what do we notice differently, right? How am I able to take care of myself? Can I use this as as scaffolding, as a platform to be able to build other lifestyle elements in? And can I practice, okay, now that I feel more comfortable moving, can I add in more comfortable exercise? Or how does that change what I'm drawn to choosing, right? So there are ways we can play with those elements while there's a medication involved. Of course, like anything, there's side effects, so managing those kind of GI discomfort elements are a factor. And then with, I see this with people doing any sort of, I don't want to say like a crash diet, but like a major short-term change. It's what does the off-ramp look like? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it's become a challenge with a lot of those medications, is that's not super clear. So if somebody was doing, I don't know, a Whole30 or a keto, for a certain period of time, and then, okay, what does that look like to transition back to a sustainable everyday? And I think that piece is almost more important, because again, that's where do we make it livable? And so then it becomes lifestyle and not just short-term intervention. So I think that's where it becomes a little bit more tricky with these medications, is that it's not clear what that looks like.
And from my understanding is that whilst it's very good for fat loss, you're actually losing quite a lot of muscle mass at the same time, which is obviously counterproductive. Right. So I guess and then I don't know if it's possible then to get the right amount of nutrients in to help maintain and build muscle while you're taking it. So right. Yeah, challenges.
Right, and so making sure we're strength training at least twice a week, getting enough protein. A lot of those similar recommendations become more important, right, when you have this drastic loss where it's typically not that it's just fat loss. We're usually losing some lean muscle mass as well, which then makes it a little more challenging to maintain that metabolic health afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about not one size fitting all. My question always is, like, for me personally, is protein. Like, that's like my big topic, is like protein, animal protein versus plant-based protein, and generally getting enough protein in. What's your take on that, knowing it's specific for everyone, because I think every body type is different. But what's kind of your view on protein?
I think protein has had a pretty good PR person in terms of its in a lot of things, and a lot of supplement type things. I do think it's important in terms of managing blood sugar and for satiety. I think that in terms of macronutrient balance, right, if we are being aware of blood sugar balance, healthy protein and healthy fats are going to play a bigger role. Let's see. I think with any food, it's not that there's clear necessarily animal versus plant. It's not a good or bad situation. It's what is the quality. So especially with animal proteins, can we get the highest quality possible? Because that is a very different proposition to the body, right, of a regenerative grass-fed animal versus a more standard production. So those elements are going to play a role as well. I think a lot in terms of ratio. Like if I was looking at the sort of USDA My Plate, I would look at, can we amp up the ratio of plant foods, have the animal foods be potentially less of a star and more of a side dish. I think finding ways to integrate that throughout the day, and in terms of getting in protein, if obviously helping with preventing muscle loss and augmenting that strength training, but just in terms of satiety, right, that it makes a big difference in keeping our mood stable, keeping our blood sugar stable. And then what that's going to look like for each person is going to depend if they're comfortable with dairy, if they're not, right, how they do with large amounts of legumes and beans. But, and less about prescriptive, like it should be X amount, 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. It's more that where are you now, right? What's your baseline now? And can we gradually start adding to that and just see what you feel? It's similar with fiber, right? I wouldn't want someone to just jump straight into 50 grams of fiber per day if they haven't been. That's going to be just uncomfortable. So having a sense of what your baseline is and where you can go from there, I think is so much more helpful than saying this is, again, arbitrarily perfect and meet this,
Yeah, I think that baseline aspect is really important and interesting. And I think for me personally, there is so mmany good, technology is really helpful in measuring baselines these days. Like you were saying, there's the wearables, there's, DEXA scans we've tried out. There's so many things that you can actually check yourself, or a body composition scale. I'm just rattling on what I'm kind of experimenting with myself. Because I think the baseline is very important, because otherwise you don't see the change you're making. For me, it was really once I understand, I measure something, and then you look at that data really for yourself, and then you see if something's working or not. Because otherwise it's very hard to stick to something. It might feel good, but if you don't really see that it's working, I think that's really helpful. And on that note, what are some sort of, let's say, newer technologies that your experience in Sensei is exploring that help people get a bit more sort of data-driven results or insights?
Yes, we do have some elements of data just to help paint that picture. So we do use the Whoop, we use the Sika body composition scans. We do some blood glucose and basic panel triglycerides, cholesterol type things, looking more to help people understand their baseline. I think there's also a discussion around what being open to qualitative outcomes as well as quantitative. So I've worked with people in the past that in terms of massive weight loss and lowering blood sugar, they've noticed I don't need coffee anymore. My eyesight improved as my A1C came down, right? So not just how your pants are fitting, right? There's so many other measures of things are working better that I don't necessarily see or can measure. Of course, like a continuous glucose monitor is like something like Levels is a great option for being able to make that visible in real time. But I think there's also something to be said for just like I said, becoming a detective and figuring out, what am I noticing? What's working better? Like if I'm eating more healthy fats, I'm not gonna be able to see or feel that all of my cell membranes are working better and the cellular communication is much more effective. But that's a gradual, my body is having an easier time doing its job that eventually I'll start seeing some positive benefits from. So being really hyper aware and looking for what are those things I'm noticing on a qualitative level, I think is helpful as well.
Did you see on that note sort of a younger generation come through that are more aware of that? They're starting to demand it?
Younger generation, they're seeing clearly what they don't want. When we have younger guests come through, a lot of times it's, okay, I don't know what's going to go wrong, but I'm feeling good and I want to maintain that. And I know I don't want what these people I've seen age differently, right? So there's definitely a sense of, should I be doing something now to get on track with that? And the other trend that I'm seeing, which I'm very excited about, is moving away from alcohol. So I think that's a huge shift that I've noticed with younger generations coming up, and even in all age demographics, of being more cognizant of their relationship with alcohol, what it does and doesn't do for them, and risk-benefit analysis. So that's, I think, exciting.
Well, that's very relevant for us because we stopped drinking 9 months ago, and for me, growing up from the UK, I always tell people, "Oh, you come out of the womb drinking in the UK." So, but going back to the beginning where we talked about identity, drinking alcohol was a huge part of my identity. So when I stopped, I started to worry, how's that going to affect how I see myself in society, how I interact with my friends and peers, and am I now going to become this kind of boring, non-exciting person? Am I going to be less confident? And weirdly, it's been the opposite. I've actually become more confident since I stopped drinking, and it's kind of fascinating. I never thought I would do it, but for so far, it's been enlightening.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Makes us feel like we're a younger generation.
Yeah, we're the younger generation.
It's the self-identity piece is huge, and it does bring up those questions, right, of how is this such a cultural norm that you have to justify not drinking, right? So I love that there's a shift in that direction. And even in just that intentionality, right? There's lots of habits that people do, whether it's eating sugar or drinking alcohol or too much caffeine or whatever it is, right? It's not that it has to be necessarily all or nothing for people that are thinking like, oh, I could never, right? What is the quantity that feels in line with what you want to move towards? For some people, it is easier with all or nothing, right? And just, this isn't part of my identity. I am someone who feels better without alcohol. Cool, that's great. Would you like a drink? No, I'm great, thank you. I've got my go-to mocktails. Like, you can't argue with I'm great, right? Yeah. So I love that. So Sensei, we do have alcohol. Our welcome drink is a beautiful cocoa shiso. It's a coconut water, shiso leaf, yuzu blend. It's refreshing, fantastic. It really, I think, opens the door to, there's a wonderful world of mocktails. We have a social hour with a weekly highlighted mocktail. The whole front of our bar is Liar's non-alcoholic spirits. And so there's a lot of options to be festive, not miss out. Oh my gosh, our bartenders are so talented with the florals, and we have blue Thai basil in our garden right now that they're using for garnish, and it's a really beautiful experience to not have that missing out feeling. There's still beautifully crafted drinks and a full sensory experience, and just with a better night's sleep and a nicer next morning.
You're sold.
Sounds incredible.
I'm in.
So with not so many, but there's a lot of wellness-focused properties established and coming into the market. What would you say that sets Sensei apart from the competition?
We have a fantastic team. I'm so grateful that there are places in the world that are focused on this, and that there are places that you can go and have this nervous system sort of reset. I'm biased because I have learned so much from my team. So I know that there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of continuous learning. One of our main values is Kaizen, or continuous improvement. And so we have all sorts of ways that we are continuously like, so this book I just read, I was just learning about this. Hey, have you heard about that? So that's just kind of a common part of our day. And I think guests really get to feel that and experience this contrast between this beautiful, serene environment and inspiration and passion. And it's a really fun world to be in.
Yeah, you can totally see that this isn't a job for you. This is your lifestyle, passion, and your identity, and that really comes across. And I think you can, like you're saying, the way you were describing that, the attention to detail that you're bringing, that the property is bringing with the other guides, that the attention to detail in the design, integrating nature, just that whole consciousness around it. I think it's just, how can you not be enveloped in that? I'm living it right now, just listening to it.
I'm so glad. I hear a lot that people find they drop into vacation mode, right? That kind of state faster on property than they do at other places, which I think is a cool sort of metric for something about this feels good.
Yeah, that's really important, because often it's when you go on vacation. I think traditionally vacation has always been more something where you didn't pay attention to yourself, because you were like, it was this release, like I'm eating and drinking what I want, might not be working out for that week, and it's just really shifted to more like, no, I'm going now to either find myself, to reset, to strengthen my good lifestyle. So, and I'm really excited about that. Travel now has really become that thing more where you come home and you actually feel better than worse, because often from vacation you can come home and be exhausted because you've done too much and you didn't take care of yourself. And then having the ability, like you were expressing, how Sensei makes people drop into that relaxation straight away. It doesn't take like 3 days to unwind and then almost your program is gone. I think that's a real positive to be able to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. That balance between, we want restorative, we want that embodied sense of nervous system down regulation, but we also want it to feel exciting and engaging. We want it to feel like it's an experimentation ground, right? I learned something in a meditation class, or my experience in the sound journey, or I'm what I took away from the vision boarding, right? Or we have aqua yoga. There's fun ways to kind of play, right? And get to be immersed in these things. And then it's like, I don't really play in daily life. I want to make that happen. How can I make that happen when I go home, right? It's about, maybe I'll find a way to do, aerial yoga. There's a studio somewhere I can find. I could take a class online. So there's different ways of having that combination of I'm getting away, I'm having a reset, but I'm also finding things that are nourishing. I'm reconnecting with what really matters. And I'm finding ways that I can make that real in my daily life so that I come home and I'm more equipped to handle life, right? We want to build a life that we don't need to escape from.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the biggest point.
That's right, yeah. Beautifully put. So if we had to put you on the spot and just say, well, if there was one thing that you think that is fairly straightforward or would have the most impact on somebody's wellness and well-being that is easily implementable, what would you say somebody should do?
My head goes to the most foundational thing would be the thing you would survive the shortest time without, which is the breath. Mm-hmm. So the breath is the easiest way to tap into that nervous system. It's something that you have with you all the time. It's basically the lightest tool in the toolbox because you're always breathing. I'm grateful the body breathes itself, but we can do it better with some intention. So foundationally, if we're breathing in such a way that tells the body we're safe, it's going to make the next thing easier. It's going to help with clarity of mind so that, whether you use a paced breather or just have a longer, slower exhale, I think that's a good place to start.
I think that's a perfect place.
Oh, yeah. Very
I
cool.
love that. I'm taking a deep breath. That note.
See, it's contagious. That's the other wonderful thing, right?
And I think, like you're saying, for me, that's the one thing I can very quickly change any state I'm in. It's if I focus on the breath. So I think I am with you. That's a good one you picked there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Brooke. This was a lovely conversation, and we're excited to hopefully come and visit you at Porcupine Creek, and excited to see where the Sensei brand and goes and expands and helps lots more people have a wellness and well-being lifestyle.
Thank you. It's fantastic to get to talk with you. And yes, I'm excited to see where Sensei goes next and what we're able to do. But we would love to have you visit. Can't wait to talk more soon.
Sounds great.
Put it on the list for sure. Thank you so much.